The best investment you can make is in yourself. Acquire knowledge, skills, and experiences that will pay dividends for a lifetime. Jeremiah Say.
You have the power to be the boss of your own life. I'm your host, Monica Allen. I'm a wife, mom, entrepreneur, best-selling author, lifelong learner, and your biz bestie. I have a love and passion for all things small business. Growing my own company from $700 to over 7 figures annually, my goal is to bring you inspiration, business-focused topics and tips, encouragement, and a community that helps you launch, grow, and scale your business, whether you are a dreamer, a side hustler, or a seasoned entrepreneur. You are listening to the Become Your Own Boss podcast.
Last week, we explored the exciting and sometimes daunting world of business funding. Today, we're taking that conversation to the next level with a dynamic guest. He's an author, entrepreneur, husband, father, farmer, and even a documentary filmmaker. A man who wears many hats and does it all with a passion for entrepreneurship. His first book, Pitchology, The Art and Science of Raising Capital for Entrepreneurs, became an Amazon bestseller. And I truly tell you, that was for a great reason. It's a must-read for anyone who wants to navigate the truly tricky waters of raising capital without getting taken advantage of. Meet Steve Distante, a man on a mission to empower both new and seasoned entrepreneurs. As part of his Pitchology series, he released Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneur Land earlier this year, a fascinating collection of fables that mix truth with just the right amount of fiction. Whether you've just started thinking about bringing investors on board or you're already in the thick of it, this episode is your go-to guide. Trust me, you'll want to hear what Steve has to say before you take your next step. Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
It's my pleasure, Monica. Thank you for having me.
Steve, I know that you are an entrepreneur at heart, starting at a very young age. Tell me about that first business, though, that really made you define yourself as an entrepreneur.
I was 6 years old. I was actually going to the horse trails behind our house where my parents lived and collecting horse manure because I really enjoy the feeling of being able to interact with my neighbors. And business gave me that capability. I'm an introvert at heart. That's part of my DNA. I've learned to overcome it when necessary, but I do have a term called too much peopling. And, so I was selling manure. They'd give me $1 or so. And actually, I probably got a really good deal. But as I say, I've been selling shit ever since.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. I know that you then have parlayed that into businesses now. What do you consider your latest business venture?
I have many businesses. I have a whole bunch of them. I have a farm down in Georgia where we're growing trees. We have cows, we have retreats, we have chickens, greenhouse. So that's a latest business. I am in the process of exploring, doing some cold plunge facilities with saunas and a pickleball facility that may be tied to that. So that's one of my current businesses. I'm writing a new book, which is called Who Hunter. I've written 3 books. One is Pitchology, The Art and Science of Raising Capital. The next one is Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneur Land, which is a series of 14 entrepreneurial fables with feedback and best practices. And the last book, the most recent one that I'm working on now, is Who Hunter. And that is how to find the right who's to help you build your team. And it's built off of a book called Who Not How from Dan Sullivan. And I actually am friends with Dan and Dean Jackson, who came up with the concept. That's a really big deal for me because I'm able to create assessments for us entrepreneurs to find the right who's in our organization. But wait, there's more. I have a platform called the Private Investor Network, and that privateinvestor.network, it's .network instead of .com. That is a platform for entrepreneurs who have invested in entrepreneurs to keep track of all of those investments And to be able to do news scraping, we have AI news scraping that allows us to be able to monitor those companies. And most recently, I was approached by venture capital funds, family offices, RIAs to participate on this platform. And my goal is to be able to help entrepreneurs scale and grow by getting matched entrepreneur investors that can help them in a very meaningful way. That's just a little bit of what I'm doing.
A little bit of what you're doing, a lot of what you're doing.
So Steve, let's just admit this up front. You didn't tell me these questions. It's not like
I did not.
It was like, it
No.
wasn't, it's just, that's what we do, right?
Yeah, I love it. We are actually going to talk about one of your books today. But before I jump into that, I want to say that I do these episodes called Boss Up Books episodes. And the latest book was Who Not How. So,
is that a weird thing? No, my life is in flow. And when you're in flow, there is no coincidence. Do you agree?
agree 100%.
Right?
100%.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it's a fabulous book. I've read it 3 times and I had to bring it to my audience as one of our Boss Up books. So tell Dan, amazing. He and Dr. Ben Hardy, I really like that book a lot.
I know both of them. I spend time with them. They're good people.
That's amazing. Okay, your book, Pitchology here. I want to talk about that because as a business owner myself, I have been very, very fearful of pitching my business to investors. I think most of us, if we didn't grow up around that and don't know much about it, it can be a very scary thing. I want you to kind of talk to us about that today. And my first question really is, what makes a company pitchable? I know that's maybe a made up word, but what makes a company pitchable to an investor?
Can I get personal?
Yes.
All right. With you?
Sure.
You are what makes your company pitchable. You personally.
Okay.
Your energy, your drive, your ability to manage and envision the future, your ability to mitigate and manage risk. That's what allows a company to pitch. When you're starting off, and you and Ethan, I believe, started this company, Zeus's Closet, I believe it's called, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
You started this business, and usually what people do when they do that is they bootstrap it. So they come up with all the money they can. Then what do? They go to their family, they go to their friends, and they say, hey, I just got an order from this sorority, and it's going to cost us $200,000 to place the order, but when we get the money back, it's going to be $400,000. Can we borrow the money and we'll give you, 10% return on that 200,000? We'll give you 220 back. Does this sound familiar? Is this the sort of thing you could have possibly done?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the friends and family. So first, we expend our own money. You know why? Because we believe in ourselves, right? Then we go to friends and family. Why? Because we believe in ourselves, but we don't have the means or the resources to be able to raise that money. And so you've got a number of entrepreneurs that find themselves in this dilemma, and they don't know if they should spend it themselves or, just go pitch it out there. And when you pitch without actually putting any of your blood, sweat, flesh, tears, emotions, depression, like all that stuff that we all experience at some point on our journey. Question is, why didn't you go and try to do all these other things on your own? And usually that's what we call OPM, other people's money. They're just looking for other people's money to risk because maybe they don't truly believe in what they've done, right? Or they're just looking to burn somebody else's cash, and they've done this. And those are frequent flyers quite often, right? One of my biggest frustrations with entrepreneurs is people who haven't actually done it. Nike got it right when they said, just do it. Yeah. So I used to do NIFTY, the National Foundation for Teaching Entrepreneurship, which would take inner city kids and teach them entrepreneurship, give them a prize, which a bank usually gave them like $5,000 or $10,000. Here's my problem. Nobody had a business yet. That first step is so important. And what do we do when we first start? We make mistakes, right? Did you ever make mistakes?
Oh, gosh.
Too many to count.
right? Have you ever lost a lot of money?
Yeah.
We call that.
Yes, a lot in my eyes for sure.
Well, in your experience, it's a lot. What do we call that? Do you
Yeah.
know when we lose money?
No, just a loss of money. I don't know. It's a learning experience for sure.
Tuition. You just got schooled. You just earned your doctorate. So we call it tuition because you'll never do that again.
Right.
Here I am on the other side of your pitch deck, which I hope has some video in it. And you decide to, and please don't take this as a derogatory comment by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been on the other end of many of pitches, and I call it pitch slapping. Like, people will then start talking at you, put the PowerPoint on, and even if you raise your hand and say, I got a question, they don't stop. They just start going. And the challenge is entrepreneurs who are pitching need to be vulnerable, accountable, and experienced to a certain degree. And when an entrepreneur investor gets involved, that's magic because they can introduce you to their network. They add instant credibility. There's an awful lot that goes on there. Pitchology, the art and science of raising capital for entrepreneurs, is not only pitching, it's also giving a seasoned entrepreneur like yourself, Monica, the ability to look at who's approaching you to maybe acquire you, invest in you, and how do you take some money off the table? Because all of us, for a very long time, suffer, starve in our businesses, macaroni and cheese and whatever else we're feeding ourselves because we can't afford the better things in life. And then suddenly we cross that chasm where suddenly we have enough money, but now somebody's going to approach us. God forbid it's the evil empire that reaches out to you, which is what I call private equity. So private equity, my second book, you get to see the private equity guy. His name is Brad Shiny Teeth, MBA, right? And bling, you just see his gold tooth going bling. And he's like, hey, I'd like you to sign this agreement. And we're going to pay you 2% up front for your equity in your company. And we're going to put you on a 5-year contract to earn out your other 98%. And inside of 2 months, you want to run away and cry. And you do, and you leave all that money on the table. I want to be here with entrepreneurs. I want to teach them how to scale and grow. Some of the greatest things when you're doing a pitch, to purely answer your question as appropriate, is to be vulnerable, to share with people your journey, where you're at. We all know that your projections are completely fabricated. There's nothing there that you could actually say that, yes, this is definitely going to happen. There may be some definitions of, like solid opportunities, and I'll give you a couple. One is, you've got a sales order. Somebody, again, sorority ordered $200,000 worth of materials, and you need to have the money to make that happen. You don't have a line of credit or anything, or you've exhausted that. And now you could make $400,000 in a heartbeat. You don't mind going to somebody. That's easy, right?
Right.
You want to hear some new awesome concept, which is actually starting to happen right now? It's called monetizing IP.
Okay. Well, you got to explain it now.
So intellectual property is actually more valuable than many of our businesses. And that's the unique things about our business that nobody else has. It could be unique designs, processes, and so on. So I have a good friend who was selling his business for and he got an offer for $500 million. And when he brought his portfolio of IP to the table, because he had it in a separate entity, he got his $1 billion. It took him about 6-8 months to get it perfectly in order. But the reality is he doubled his value because, businesses are valued upon a thing called EBITDA, right? And we've all heard of EBITDA and all that, earnings before income tax, blah, blah, blah. I know what it is. I just don't want to waste your time on it. When you're raising capital, we look at all those alternatives. And then who do you want to invest in your company? Because if you get, somebody that is just going to be nagging you about this whole thing, that's going to be annoying. And if you ghost them, meaning you just take their money and hope to run away, and I don't mean that you're stealing their money, but you do something and then you don't communicate anymore, that's not so good. Creating victory conditions for somebody to contribute money to your company, and then clearly defining how those individuals will be involved or informed is really, really important, because that's where people get real dissatisfied. Either they'll be really annoying or you won't communicate well as an entrepreneur. And being able to actively participate in that is where we get our thrill. Monica, have you ever invested in another company or not yet?
I guess if you look at just, the normal buying of stocks and investing that way, yes, but it's not, no one pitched me, it's owning stock in Apple or Tesla.
The kind of stuff that, regular people do, right?
Right.
Have you ever met somebody that reminded you of you?
I can't say I have.
All right. Well, when you find that person, because what do we say? The eyes can only see what the mind is looking for, right? When you do find that person and they do want a mentor and they do need some money, you probably are going to say something like, this person gets it. Oh, yeah, they're on to something. And you'll likely want to put some money into them. And then they will have friends, or you will have friends that potentially, you know what? And, it depends what pulls at your heartstrings. I use an example quite often, which is a B Corp, beneficial corp in Africa, run by a woman in agriculture, right? A microloan. She needs $1,000 to be able to do this business out there, right? Well, that rings the bell on some people, right? Some people say that's a great idea, and they get to remotely mentor that person. That's a really fulfilling opportunity for somebody. But back to your question. I've written this book for entrepreneurs, not to get taken advantage of. Because when we as entrepreneurs get approached by a buyer, we usually know one way of getting acquired, whoever that is. If it's a venture capital fund, portfolio, or a SPAC, a single person purpose acquisition company, or PE, or a roll up, like there's all these different things that you can do, right? That is where I don't want people to be confused. When we were first preparing for this, you had mentioned that you kind of went, around a couple of chapters looking at things, but hadn't intensely focused. This book is written in entrepreneurese, which is, I don't use really big words, and it's easy to understand because it's me explaining it as an entrepreneur. And when you're going through, you don't know. I don't know if you've ever heard of a SPAC, and it's not important, but a SPAC, a single purpose acquisition company, has they do an objective. They have this bundle of money. They have all this cash, and then they have an objective. And the objective is to find companies in the, fraternity and sorority world. And they come to you and they only have 2 months left to close this thing. And you're sitting there going, they're pushing me. They're a pushy bunch. I've given you an interview with somebody who actually, Peter Diamandis was that one, who actually has a SPAC. And you'll find every one of my chapters has both a podcast and the reading inside, because we do like to learn in different styles. That pitch needs to be based upon who you're talking to, what you're looking to do, and who you align with. And getting a bad investor can be as bad as, that's a curse when you get their money and now all of a sudden you're really distracted by them being very needy and lots of questions and you're just trying to do your business.
Right. Exactly. Okay. A couple things around that. Because you said a lot. There was a lot of meat in there, Steve. Of course, a lot of us have probably seen Shark Tank, which we know is a very small snippet.
Yeah.
But if we are preparing, you mentioned you should have some video in your pitch. If you're putting together your pitch deck, what does that look like? What are we putting forth to investors?
What I like to tell people is, don't open the kimono too early. And what happens is, you meet somebody and you're suddenly asking for a non-disclosure agreement right out of the box. Doesn't work that way, right? Why would I possibly sign an NDA when I don't even know what we're going to be talking about? I may have a conflict already, and then I'm going to get myself in a lawsuit stating that I was the one who, violated it based upon prior. Start slow. And there are a couple of different tips and tricks I can share with you. One is, if you have mentors, and even if you don't, you can reach out to people and have your pitch deck, so to speak, and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing a capital raise. I'm not looking to gain capital or pitch you on this. I just want to share with you what I'm doing. And if you see any improvements I could make, please let me know. And often they become your investors, or they know people in that space who would be beneficial. So that's a good one, right? Mm-hmm. My second book, I have a chapter. It's towards the end. It's called Just Because It Moves Doesn't Mean You Can Milk It, right? And it's actually paying homage to we have a bull who actually identifies as a cow. His name is Chandler. And I'm like, don't milk him. That's not the guy. He's a guy. And the reason I bring it up is liquidity is not something that all of us always have. If we did, we wouldn't be very smart investors if we always had gobs and gobs of cash laying around. Mm-hmm. So there's things that happen through our careers, our journey as entrepreneurs, where we do have access to capital. And that's great. Getting on somebody's radar that you're going to be doing something in a period of time is a really good idea. But there's also one other really great way of being able to access capital from people from a place they didn't even know that they could have access to. And that's called the SIDRA. It's called the SDIRA. And that stands for Self-Directed Individual Retirement Account. And what that does for a person is the person who's investing can invest in alternative assets that are an arm's length or greater. And what arm's length means is you don't have a personal relationship with them, like a family relationship. Like there's a certain distance that you need to be. You can't have your spouse or your mom or dad do it, but you can have people at other distances do it. And there are custodians that do this all the time. There's a fee for it, but it gives you access to capital that you wouldn't know you normally would have. Your investors didn't know they had access to that. In your case, which I completely fabricated, of needing $200,000, a person who had an IRA account could say, Monica, you know what? I'm going to do a SIDRA and I'm going to have a note written up, and it's going to be a no payment loan. And at the end of the note, it balloons and it'll have a 10% of whatever that time outstanding is. And who wouldn't want to have another 20 grand inside their IRA from a person who they know, throughout that process, and they trust, and they've seen at family parties or whatever? That's access to capital that you don't even know is out there. And the book goes through so many ways of being able to do that. ESOPs. Have you heard of ESOPs? Employees.
I have heard. Yeah.
So what's one of our biggest problems right now is getting and retaining employees, right? Mm-hmm. Well, what about if they're owners in your business? Well, heck, that's pretty good, right? And they deserve it. And you're able to take some money off the table, invest it in other things. And by the way, ESOPs don't pay income tax, believe it or not. You could actually keep half your company if you wanted, work towards the future and participate in the growth, and take some substantial money off the table. So there's all these nuances as entrepreneurs that we don't realize as opportunity to be able to scale and grow.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, Steve, I need to read all three of your books. I know one isn't out yet, but I do definitely need to read all three of your books. And like I said to you before we jumped into the interview, is I've only skimmed Pitchology. And I know you do tell us we can skip around, and I did the assessment. So I know chapter 7 was my chapter, but I do recommend that other people pick up the books as well. A few more questions for you. I feel like I'm not surrounded by investors or people who may be potential investors. How do you find those people? Where are they?
Yeah, I strongly suggest LinkedIn as a primary tool for people connecting with one another. I do recommend people look for mentors in their lives. And usually that's somebody that's maybe in your industry, maybe older than you, part of circles. So when we're looking for mentors, we're often finding people who could potentially be an investor in our business. And it's not like you reach out to somebody, hey, could you be my mentor? Hey, by the way, I'm raising money. Could you do that? It's got to be genuine. And
Right.
we belong to communities. So you and I know each other, not only from an awesome safari vacation trip, right?
Right.
But we also know each other through EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. Well, guess what? A lot of EOers know other EOers. And inside of EO, they have a thing called Deal Exchange, where people actually will, do some investing, because a lot of us have some money to do something with, and we're not satisfied with, putting it into a mutual fund or any of those other things that regular people do. Also, dressing yourself up for your suitor, meaning who do you want to acquire you, invest in you? Make it pretty for them. Make it really obvious. And I like this. I write on an index card 3 things I'm looking to take away from a discussion, put them in my back pocket, and somehow magically from my rear end, my back pocket to my brain, it just happens every single time. And I don't even have to say it. It's usually the other person saying to me, hey, you know what? I was just thinking about this. I have some money laying around. If you need that 200,000, Monica, if you gave me, something reasonable, I know you got, you could double your money, give me 5-10%. That would be awesome. And you wrote in your back pocket, $200,000, 10%. And the biggest question that people who are pitching often don't know the answer to, nor do they think about, is what's the exit for the investor? How do they get out? Right? So being clear on how they're going to get out, because most people want a thing called a safe note. And I get it. I've invested in maybe 2 safe notes in my career. They've all gone dead. But the reality is, if you can provide some means of having an end to the investment, not just a trigger, a time period or so, that's amazing, because people want to know how they're going to get the money out. And when you're creating, if you go to the private investor network community, right, when you're creating what we call the victory conditions, or an MOU, the memorandum of understanding, we want to know, how often will you see financials? Are you going to tell us when you have some sort of lawsuit? Are you going, how are we going to communicate? What's the frequency? And do you need me to sit on an advisory board or a board of directors? What does this look like? Because nobody wants to invest, if you're a savvy investor, in an entrepreneur who's got a big red S tattooed on their chest. Superman or Superwoman is not who we're looking for. We're looking for good leaders who have a team, who at least could build a team, and they've got some experience. And one last thing I'll share with you is, as entrepreneurs, I have this, we call it the entrepreneurial triangle. It's in Once Upon a Time in Entrepreneur Land. And it's the DNA of an entrepreneur. And one is drive. I don't know if you've read the book Drive. It's actually right up there, Driven. I'm sorry. So written by Doug Brackman. He's a good friend of mine. I was sitting in his cold plunge in Nashville a couple of weeks ago. We have drive. The other thing we have is free will. We don't like anybody to tell us, is this resonating with you right now?
Yeah,
We don't
of
like
course.
anybody to tell us what to do. And then the last part is risk. We like to take risk, but as Steve Jobs said, bet big, but don't bet the farm, right? We're
Right.
looking for that in the people we invest in. We're looking for that horse in the race, that bull, that whatever it is, that angel, that person who's going to make, their concept reality. And in my second book, I interview a guy named Salim Ismail, and he wrote a book called Exponential Organizations. Salim had taught me this: good organizations have an immunity to our crazy ideas that we come up with. We chase
Mhm.
shiny things. We're squirrel hunters, like squirrel, squirrel, right? And if
Right.
you have a good organization, your organization will have an immunity to all your crazy ideas. And what you need to do as an entrepreneur is to create a research and development team outside of your normal business, because you will stress your business so much because you're constantly coming back with the best idea in the world. And it's just based upon, what you just went through. But in reality, your team's going to do this. Uh-oh, here she goes again. Have you ever done that?
I have. I try not to involve my team with my squirrels very much. I may have checked that box already because I try not to get them
But
involved with it. I
have
let
you
them
built a
focus on.
team? Have you built a team for that? Have you built a team
I
around?
have not built a team for that. It's usually Ethan and I bouncing our squirrely ideas amongst each other. We have not done that.
Yeah, so that book, Exponential Organizations, really explores that quite well. And we've found that it's a really good way of being able to keep your research and development team very focused, because what happens is your great shiny thing, squirrel hunting, whatever, ends up being something that gets thrown to the back burner and then eventually into the garbage, as long as you didn't remember that. And then you'll come up in the middle of a meeting and go, whatever happened with us doing, everything, all the purchase orders in purple crayon. I like purple and everybody's doing them in black still. What's going on here?
Right. I want to go back real quick because I want to make sure people and me that I understand what you're talking about. You mentioned the safe note. What is that?
Yeah, it's a simple agreement for future equity. S, simple agreement. A, for future equity. And a safe note is where basically you're selling somebody air. It's, okay, so you'll give me this money because I feel my company is going to be valued a gazillion times more than it is right now. And
Mhm.
when I do make that offer to other people, you will have the opportunity to get a 10% discount, a 20% discount on what I'm offering other people. And I think it's a really valuable way of doing it. Some people like it, some people don't. But as a seasoned entrepreneur investor, not my favorite way to do it, because usually it's just, it's smoke and mirrors. You never get anything back. It just kind of poof goes away, and they're not accountable.
Okay.
But you can try it, and it's going to be based upon the experience of that entrepreneur, the history. Let's say, Monica, you were like one of the chapter members or former chapter member, Sarah Blakely, right, who sold her company for $900 million or so. Well, that might have been a good safe note, right? Because you would have been able to cash out, and she had done that. But then she comes up with another business and she's offering a safe. Well, that's probably a good opportunity right there, because she's figured out how to cash out, how to operate a business, how to prove herself in
Mhm.
business. And so it depends on who it is that is doing the offer.
Okay. Gotcha.
But it's a favorite for most entrepreneurs. They're like, "Ooh, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to provide any equity. That's great." Nobody wants to give up equity. That's just not what they want to do. And I get it.
Yeah, I can say the equity piece is probably the main reason one of our accountants in the early days encouraged us not to look for investors. He did not want us to lose any portion, or I wouldn't say lose, but give up any portion of our business. But anyway,
I'm going to give you this.
Okay.
If you go down the route of doing a really good job with your intellectual property,
Mm-hmm.
there are companies that value it and you can monetize it, your intellectual property, by a loan, a line of credit. There's like a couple ways of being able to do it. You can actually sell some of your IP, which has zero effect on your business right now, like you do
Mm-hmm.
it in different verticals. And this is a very hot up and coming asset class. It's here now. We just don't know it. And most people are missing it. Like somebody might come pick you up because they like your logo or they like your whatever, and you don't even know what they're doing. And they actually just take it, sell it, and get all that money back at the end. So there are some other ways of being able to raise capital that you never even imagined. And it's not just the pitch. Here's one more warning on pitching. A lot of
Okay.
owner founders go out there. They pitch slap a lot, right? They jump with people on in person or on their Zooms. They don't listen. And then they get themselves into a position of desperate. And then suddenly there's blood in the streets. People can smell it on you that you are desperate. And there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing less attractive than a company that is desperate. And people cause that on themselves because they spend all their time pitching, not keeping their business running. And that's usually because they don't have the team. A lot of times it's better to have somebody that's actually doing it, like an investment banker or so.
Okay. Well, that makes sense
Yeah.
because you have your focus is split in multiple ways. Steve, one of the things you mentioned in the book is you talk about telling a story. And I know you mentioned as owners or people pitching, you have to be vulnerable. But what else should our stories include to be compelling to investors?
What we call origin stories, like where did you come from? Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
How did you happen to come upon this? Tell me some difficult times, lessons learned. Those sort of things go a really long way with an investor because they show that you're seasoned, you're mature, you're willing to confront what it is that you've done. And as I mentioned before, we call that tuition, where you've earned your stripes in a particular area because you have done certain things. Most people are trying to get their selfie with the best look and so on. I'd rather have a selfie of me screaming like, oh my God, I just found out that, this person in my life stole money from me, from my business, and I got to fire them and blah, 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 happened to me actually. But,
Wow.
that's something that I'll never have happen to me again. And the reason is I've created all of these ways of not having that happen. Sharing that story is really valuable because an investor would know, nope, we know that they have good financial controls inside this company.
Right. Gotcha. It's interesting because as I was reading your book, and I'm going to recommend that everyone grab this book if you're interested in looking at investors at all. I learned so much and, I learned about family offices. I didn't even know that was a thing. You got to pick up the book, people out there, to figure out what that is. But I really kind of walked away feeling like my business is not pitchable. I've got a lot of work to do is what I realized. Building up the team and really getting my ducks in a row to even get to that point. And I think I was left a little disappointed in myself because I'm like, I've been doing this for 20 years and I haven't gotten to this point yet. Anyway, that's just kind of an aside and a thought that I had as I was reading through the book. I'm like, oh, I got a lot to work on. But for those of you who are listening and you're newer in your business, read this now so you can get your foundation right from the start and build up from there. I just wanted to add that piece in there, Steve.
Yeah. Let's not get too down on ourselves because the reality is you did the hard part, which is you've created a profitable company. That's the hard part. First couple of years, 2-3 years, you bleed. The next year or 2 or 3, you're lucky if you break even, right? After that, you have a celebration, you stop eating ramen, and now all of a sudden you're in business, right? Yeah, let's do this. We'll get some protein too. That'd be good. I mean, we all go through it, right? We have to go on
Right.
austerity for a while. And then there's times when we have those blips in the economy or in our businesses where we actually have to borrow against the kids' college savings or our retirement plan or our parents, and we got to grovel. I remember it got so bad during 2008 that I actually went to all of my providers, in my company, the software providers, for rent and so on. And I groveled. I said, I can't pay you and I don't want to go out of business. I need help. And I got probably 6 months from one company, another whatever. And then the rent got reduced. It was me just being humble and not trying to play games with people that got me through. But what you said is really important, which is you read it and you realize you're not ready. But guess what? Now your brain has changed. And so I'm doing evaluation for my company, for one of my companies right now, for an ESOP, for an employee stock ownership plan, because I think it's a great way to give equity to the people who helped you get there. But it's also a way of us taking out some capital from the businesses, right? They're going to come back to me and they say, your valuation is X. And I'm like, well, I thought it was 10X. What could I do to get it to that level? And it'll give me a roadmap. The exercise is very valuable. However, disclose as little as possible if you're not doing this with somebody you're paying. Because if you're not paying somebody to do the valuation, you're creating value for them because they're going to either take your ideas or the opportunities and do something with it. So if you're not paying for it, you're the product.
That's a great takeaway there, Steve. Thank you for sharing that, for sure.
Careful.
Yes. Well, I know you are super busy, and I really do appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything else you would like to leave us with when it comes to pitching or when it comes to growing and scaling our businesses before we jump off today?
I'm a big fan of knowing A, your audience, but B, your teams. Big fan of strength finders to find people and put them in the right seats on the bus. Strength finders is one of my favorite go-tos to start building that team because we only have so much bandwidth. And then on the other side, I think Patrick Lencioni's book, which is The 6 Working Geniuses, which also has an assessment, helps people to gain some, it's kind of like taking an X-ray of your business and then seeing who the right people are and why they're in those roles, because it ends up creating a very fulfilling experience inside your company as you scale and grow. Because as you and I both know, growing can be a very painful experience. And the reality is what we thought we wanted, we actually didn't realize how painful it was to get. When you're building your business, think to the future, think about where you'd want it to go, have something viable for that business to need that money. And if a person wants to risk this and invest in your company, how will they get a return? Is it a solid plan or is it just a guess or a hope? And how can you create those victory conditions for that investor to feel they're A, appreciated, be informed, and C, even most important, they become evangelists for you and your product and your company for future raises, perhaps, because once you start raising, future raises are clearly in your future to scale and grow even more. And that's a really important part of this process as well. And again, look in the mirror and be vulnerable, like be who you are. Don't try to be somebody else. Don't try to impress them with whatever it is that you don't actually represent. Tell them why. And if you know your why, if you have a purpose that's bigger than your business itself, be sure to be able to articulate that really well, because that will help you find the right people who should be investing in the opportunity because you align from a heart or a visceral perspective, and people will give to that all day long.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was amazing. And I appreciate your time very much.
Absolutely. This was a joy. Thank you so much. And keep doing what you're doing, because this is invaluable to the entrepreneurs. We're scared. We're clueless. We hit a thing called a glass ceiling sometimes where we're confused. And being able to listen to a valuable podcast like this and to be able to connect with fellow entrepreneurs is invaluable. So thank you for your commitment to our tribe, which we call entrepreneurship.
Yes. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Steve, thank you so much for joining the Become Your Own Boss podcast family and for being such an incredible mentor. There's truly a lot to take away from the conversation Steve and I had, but what really stood out to me is that when you pitch your business, you're not just selling a product or service. You're pitching yourself, your passion, and your authenticity. If you're thinking about bringing investors on board, let me share a bit of wisdom from my own journey this year. My word of the year is connection, and it's more relevant than ever in this context. As Steve mentioned, it's crucial to build genuine relationships before diving into the legalities, like NDAs, also known as non-disclosure agreements. You want to get out there, meet people, and make real connections. Another key takeaway, get your hands on Steve's book, Pitchology. It's a comprehensive guide to understanding the wide variety of investor options available to you. As the quote at the top of the episode says, the best investment you can make is in yourself. Acquire knowledge, skills, and experiences that will pay dividends for a lifetime. Learning is a lifelong journey. And Steve, he truly packed this episode with insights, and there were a lot of acronyms. But it's to help us all navigate the complexity of funding. And whether you're considering pitching to investors or simply exploring your options, Pitchology is a must-read. I'll be honest, seeking investors isn't something I'm rushing into. Right now, I'm not sure I want the responsibility of answering to shareholders, or I'm not really sure if it's the best path for growth in our business. But what about you? Do you think bringing on investors might be the right move to scale your business? Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, I'm grateful for you. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate, share, and review the podcast. I want to reiterate, share. Please take a moment to share not only this episode, but share the Become Your Own Boss podcast with a friend or fellow entrepreneur or someone who just wants or is considering going down that path. And don't forget to visit my website, monicaallen.com, and sign up for the Level Up Living newsletter. Remember, now is the time. Now is the time to level up, leave a legacy, and become your own boss.